This is the Freelance Client Dashboard template for Notion, built so that freelancers can easily organize and keep track of all things client related. From incoming leads and client outreach to quote and contract status, you can quickly see the position of each client and what tasks need to be done and when. The dashboard includes some handy automated features too, like calculating when you should next contact a client, a daily task section, and what actions you need to take based on the client's current status. All of which means you can save time, stay organized, and focus on turning contacts into potential new clients. Over the course of this video, I'm going to run through the various features of the dashboard and how you can utilize it to keep on top of your client management. It's quite a long video, so I've included chapters below so you can skip ahead at any point. To get started, I'll show you how to add and edit a new client within the dashboard. I'll then move on to explain all of the different views and features that help you manage them. On the homepage then, we have this Add New section here on the left. And for this example, we want to add a new contact. So I'll simply click the New button under the Contact heading. This brings up the New Client page. And right now it just has nothing in it, and all of these options you can see here are blank. Now rather than having to fill out all of these things manually, we can scroll down and choose from one of these templates here at the bottom, depending on the type of client we're adding. So we've got an outreach client, an incoming lead client, a new quote request client, a new contract request client, and even an existing client. Each of these templates will populate the fields above with different information. So if I click the outreach client template and scroll back up, you can instantly see things have changed a bit. We now have this little outreach emoji at the top, the type field has been set to outreach, the client phase is now set to initial contact, and the contact phase is set to not yet contacted. If I undo this by hitting Command Z and I choose the incoming lead template instead, you can see that this is slightly different. This time the icon is an incoming arrow, the type is set to incoming lead, and the contact status is set to lead received. This will all make a little more sense later on, but for now I'm going to enter the client name at the top, and I'll set this to Sherlock Holmes. Then I'll set the email to sherlock@221b.com. I'll leave everything else the same, and I'll click back into our dashboard. Immediately you can see that our new client is appearing in this section here, and each of these cards is a different client. Throughout the template, clients will usually appear as cards like this, and at any point you can click a card to bring up the edit page. So I can click the client we've just created, and I can add a new phone number, for example. Click back into the dashboard, and everything's been updated. So this is how you edit and update each client in the dashboard. Just click into a card and change what you need to, and then click back into the dashboard. I'll now quickly run through each of the client properties and what they mean in the dashboard. Inside the client page, we have a number of different properties. The first three are pretty simple. We've got the name, email, and phone number. Then we have the last contacted date. And this is a really important one because it drives a lot of the logic within the dashboard. Basically, whenever you contact your client, you need to update this field to the current date. I'll explain this in a little more detail later on. The next field is snoozed until, and this comes into play a little later on when we perhaps want to put off a task for a bit. The next field is client type, and this has two options, incoming lead or outreach. This basically lets you separate clients by whether they contacted you or if you contacted them. The next field is the client phase, and this is the core of the dashboard really. Here you can organize clients into three main active phases. We've got initial contact, quote, and contract. From there, clients will then be placed into one of the three final stages. They either become a full client, a potential future client, or the lead will unfortunately end. Basically, this field provides the overall status of a client, and the idea is that a client will move through the active phases and into the final stage. This process is visualized quite nicely on the homepage of the dashboard under the Overall Client Phases section. you can see we have the three main active columns: initial contact, quote, and contract. And then hidden over here are the final stages. So for example, a client will move from initial contact to you providing a quote to contract negotiations, and then hopefully they'll become a full client. They could even skip the quote phase and go straight to the contract phase. And then again, they'd be placed into one of the three final categories. One thing to note here is that rather than having to go into each client card and update the phase manually, we can actually just drag and drop them from each column into the next one, and everything will be updated for us. So that's the client phase field. The next three fields relate to the active phases we've just seen, and you can think of these as subcategories for each one. The first one we have here is the contact status, and this helps us keep track of where we are in terms of contacting a client. So when our client is in the initial contact phase, we can set the contact status to one of these options. We've got lead received, which is where we have an incoming lead that we need to reply to. Not yet contacted, which is mostly used for outreach clients that we still need to contact. Contacted, so whenever we've sent a message to a client, we'll choose this option. And followed up. This is used when we've not received a reply from a client, and then we've followed up with them. At the bottom, there's then these two final stages, which are essentially the end goal of this phase. Again, this is visualized nicely using columns on the dashboard, only this time it's under the Phase 1 Initial Contact heading on the dashboard. So just like before where a client moves through the overall phases, we use this status field to keep track of where we are when contacting a client. So they'll move from not yet contacted to contacted when we've sent them a message, and then hopefully we won't need to follow up with them, and we either move them to the phase complete stage or we put them on the back burner for future contact. When a client reaches the phase complete stage, it then means we're done with the initial contact phase and we can move on to either the quote or contract stages. So let's say we've finished our contact with the client and we now need to provide them with a quote. I'll set this to phase complete, and in our overall phases, I'll then choose quote. So we're moving through the overall phases. The quote status field is slightly different because we first of all need to create a quote to keep track of it. So let's take a look at how to do that. From the main dashboard, I'll click the Add New button under the Quote heading this time to create a new quote. And just like when we added a new client, there's a template for us at the bottom. So I'll click the New Quote template and I'll add a title for this quote. The next thing we need to do is assign this quote to a client. So I'll click into the client field here and I'll search for our client name. When we've found it, I'll click the little plus icon, and this has now linked our client to this quote and populated some fields for us. Now we can see that under the quote status field, this is where we can track the progression of the quote. Just like the contact status, we have a couple of different options. So we've got not yet sent, and this is for obviously when we haven't sent it and we're prepping it. We've got sent, we've got followed up if there's been no reply. And then we've got a few end goals here too, like accepted, closed if it's rejected, and there's also this ghosted option, because it can be quite handy to see if a client has made you do a lot of work in creating a quote, only for them to just disappear and not respond. So let's say I've created a quote elsewhere and sent it off to our client. That means I'll now set the quote status to sent. Because a client can have many quotes attached to them, we need to specify that the quote we've just created is the active one. So now what I need to do is go back to my client card. You can see here that it's now in the quote stage, and I'll click in to edit it. And what I'll do is come down to this option here, Active Quote, and I can search for our quote that we've just created. In this case, there's only a couple, so it's pretty clear. and I'll press the plus button. Instantly, you can now see that the quote status is linked and it's showing as sent. If I click back into the dashboard homepage and scroll down to the Phase 2 quote section, you can now see that our client and their quote are showing up here in the sent column. All of the cards in this section relate to the quotes that we've created. So if I ever need to make a change to one of the quotes to update the status, I can either drag and drop it into a new section, or I can click into a card and make any changes. Even though you're editing the quote cards here, because we've linked it to our client, the information on the client pages will update automatically. You won't have to do anything else once it's set up. So that's how to add and edit quotes. Let's now imagine that our client Sherlock Holmes has accepted the quote and we need to move them into the contract phase. Right now we're still inside the quote card here for our client Sherlock Holmes. In order to move them into the contract phase, I first of all need to update the quote status to accepted. If I then close the quote card and come back into the dashboard, I can scroll up to the overall status section and you can see that Mr. Holmes is still sitting in the quote column. That's because we now need to change the overall status of the client to the contract phase. So just like before, I'll click the client card and I'll change the client phase to contract. And now this is where the contract status field comes in. Again, we have a few different options, and the whole idea is to update this client page with the status of the contract. So let's say I've created a contract somewhere else and I've sent it off to the client. I now need to set this status to sent. If I come back into the dashboard page, I can now scroll down to the Phase 3 contract section and our client card is sitting happily in the sent column. Just like with the other stages, we can keep track of everything via these columns, and hopefully our clients will move through them in sequence to the signed phase. So let's say Sherlock Holmes has signed the contract. We then need to update the client phase one last time. So if I click into the card again, this time we can set the overall status to complete, and they're now a full client. One last field to mention here on the client page is the source field. Now this isn't specifically required, it's more so you can keep track of where your clients are coming from so that you can use that information to perhaps build up other outreach areas or focus in on the sources that work best for you. So that's an overview of adding, editing and managing clients in the dashboard. We've seen how we can track clients through the various overall phases and then focus in on what needs to be done within each of those phases in order to turn contacts into full clients and move them through the process. The next thing we'll look at is the Today's Tasks section. The Today's Task section sits at the top of the dashboard because it shows the most pressing actions that need your attention. We can see that it's separated by the overall client phases: initial contact, quotes, and contracts. And here we can see that inside each of the client cards there's this little green traffic light emoji. And this tells us the action that we need to currently take for this client. These actions are automatically generated based on various conditions such as the client's phase, status, and when we last contacted them. Under each phase here, you can also choose to view the tasks grouped by the status or the actions that need to be taken, both of which can be useful for seeing what needs to be done. Now, this entire section is predominantly powered by this field here in the client cards, the last contacted date. As the name suggests, what this does is it tells the dashboard when you last contacted a client. And the dashboard uses this date along with the status fields to decide when you should next contact the client as well. So for example, at the moment this outreach client, Henrietta Hudson, has a status of not yet contacted, and as a result the next contact date is automatically set to today. If we don't do anything right now and wait until tomorrow, then this date will automatically change to tomorrow's date too, so that it doesn't get forgotten about. But let's say I've now sent this client a message. So if I change the contact status to contacted, you can see that the actions field is now telling us to add a last contacted date. So up here in the last contacted date, I'll set it to today. Click away and you can see that the action is now saying await response. If I head back into the dashboard, you can also see that that client has now gone from today's tasks because we've effectively completed that task for today. If I come down to the overall status section, you can see that the client card is still here and the action is set to simply wait for a response. If I open up this client card again and come down to the next contact field, we can see that the date is automatically set to 3 days after today, or 3 days after the last contacted date. The reason it's set to 3 days from the last contacted date is because if we haven't heard back from the client by then, the dashboard will add this field back into the today's task section with an action that says follow up. So rather than waiting for 3 days for this to happen, I'll come up here and set the last contacted date to 3 days before today to show you what happens. Instantly, you can see that the action has changed from await response to follow up. And if I click away and go back to the today's task section, the client now appears here again because we now need to follow up with them. So that's why it's really important to update the last contacted date whenever you contact your client. Get into the habit of always checking if this field is right when you make any changes. To help try and catch any issues with the last contacted date, there's also a section at the bottom of the dashboard that will show any clients that may need their date changing. It may show some that don't, but it's always good to double check. One final thing to mention about this section is that sometimes you may need to push a task back a bit. That's why there's also a snooze function built in. So let's say I want to push this client task back by a week. All I have to do is open up the client page, set the snooze until value to next week, click back into the dashboard, and you can see that it's magically gone from today's tasks. If I head into the client outreach page and head down to the upcoming task section, you can now see that the task has been set to a week from now. In a week's time, you don't have to do anything, it will just appear back in the today's task section automatically. So that's the today's task section. Next, we'll look at all of the different dashboard pages. So far, we've mostly been focused on the main dashboard homepage and the different client phases in particular. So let's take a look at the last couple of sections on the homepage, and then we'll look at the other pages the dashboard has to offer. At the bottom of the homepage then, we have a recently added and recently updated section. And this is really useful if you ever need to quickly find any record that you've just created or changed. You can see that each of these sections has columns for contacts, leads, quotes, companies, which we'll look at in a moment, and notes, which we'll also look at soon. So these are the last two sections of the homepage. Next, we'll come up to the top and take a look at the navigation menu that appears on every page of the dashboard. Each of these links is a page that will basically display your data in different ways. The contacts page, for example, is basically your entire address book. It has all of your clients regardless of whether they're an incoming lead, an existing client, or an outreach client. If we take a look inside the page then, we can see that the layout is slightly different to the home page. We still have a today's task section at the top, but rather than being separated out by client phase, this just shows all of our client tasks in a list. Over to the left, we have an Add New button, which works in exactly the same way as the one on the home page for adding new clients. And we have a recently added column underneath so that it's easy to access any new clients that we've created. We've also got this upcoming task section as well, and this gives us a nice calendar view of all the tasks that are due within the current month. If you want to look even further ahead, you can also change the month you're looking at up here as well. So let's say we've completed all of the tasks for today. We could always have a look at the upcoming tasks here to see if there's anything else we can work on. Below this section, we then have the All Contacts table. And this is essentially all of the raw data of your contacts. This shows everyone. What's great about this is that we can use this search function at the top of the table to search for any client we want to, and then we can see all the information attached to them. Underneath the All Contacts table, we then have a number of different views that show our client data in different ways. The Full Clients table only shows us our completed clients, and again we could search this if we needed to. Then, just like the homepage, we can view our clients by their current phase. Underneath this, we can see our clients separated out by their type, so either outreach clients or incoming leads. Below that, we can then view our clients by their source, and this would give us a really nice picture of where our clients are coming from. Finally, we have this notes table at the bottom here. We'll look at notes a little later on, but for now, that's it for the contacts page. Again, this is basically your address book, and it's where you can find all of the information you've stored about your clients. If I scroll back up to the top then, we'll then take a look at the incoming leads page. You can see that this page is structured in the same way as our contacts page that we've just seen. Only now we're just seeing the data for our incoming leads, rather than all of our clients. So here in the daily tasks section, we're seeing all of our daily incoming leads tasks. We can add a new lead using this button. We can see all of our recently added leads underneath. And again, we can view any upcoming tasks over the current months. Further down, we have an all leads table that we could again search if we wanted to. And we can view all our current leads by their lead status as well. If I scroll back up to the menu and click on the client outreach page, you can see that it's exactly the same setup. Only now, we're dealing solely with our outreach clients rather than incoming leads. The reason these two pages are here in the dashboard is because it allows you to focus in on each type of client. So let's say you were having a new business day, for example, and the goal was to reach out to loads of new clients all at once. Rather than using the main dashboard, we can come to this page and solely deal with all of the client outreach data without having to work around all the other types of clients. And it's the same again with the incoming leads page. It gives you the ability to focus in on the specific type of client that you're working with. So that's the client pages. We'll now look at the quotes page. Again, the structure of this page is quite similar to the client pages. We have the quote tasks needing to be done today at the top. We could add a new quote if we wanted to, and we can view any quotes that need our attention over the coming weeks and months. Below this, we then have our different views. We can view active quotes by their current status. We can see all of our accepted quotes. And we can also see all of the inactive quotes as well. And this will show us any quotes that have been rejected, or any where the client has just turned into a ghost as well. So this table could be really quite useful for seeing if there's a pattern to any of the quotes that don't quite make it into being full projects. Finally, we have this table of notes at the bottom as well. And again, we'll look at the notes a little later on in the video. If I scroll back up to our menu, we can now take a look at the penultimate link here, the companies page. So rather than storing information on companies in our client pages, the dashboard keeps things separate for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that companies can have multiple people working there. So if we were dealing with 2 clients at one company, for example, we'd then need to duplicate that data for each person if it was attached to their client cards. Instead, what we can do is add a new company using this link, or the link in the dashboard homepage. And then what we can do is link all of the clients that we need to using this client field here. The same way we attach clients to quotes, this will attach clients to companies. So to demonstrate then, I'll first choose this new company template at the bottom. I'll give the company a name, in this case, Detective Agency, and I'll set the address to 221B Baker Street, London. Then I'll link our clients, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So now we have one company record that's shared between multiple clients. And if I come back to the contacts page, click on our Sherlock Holmes client card, you can see that the company is now showing here at the bottom as a link on our client page. And there'll be another one on Dr. Watson's page as well. So that's how to add companies. And if I come back to the companies page, you can see that it's pretty much the same setup as the other pages we have too. So if we ever need to manage our company information, then this is the place to do it. The final thing we're going to look at is the Notes section here at the end of the menu. As the name suggests, this is where all the notes of our dashboard can be found. So let's take a look at how it all works. Let's say I have a call with our client Sherlock Holmes, and I want to keep some notes about the call. Just like adding a new client, I'll click the Add New button at the side here. I could also do this on the home page as well. So this is the new note page, and it's similar to the new client page or the new quote page. At the bottom we can see there's a couple of templates. We've got General Note, Important Note, and Call Note. So because this note is about a call, I'll choose the Call Note template. And we can see that this has updated the icon at the top, and it's added these headings down below as well. So first of all, we'll add a title, and we'll call it Baker Street Motion Design Project Call. And then just like with the quotes that we added, we can link this note to our client using the client field here. So I'll choose Sherlock Holmes. Notes can also be linked to companies and quotes as well. And the links work in exactly the same way. Just click the field, find the record you want to link the note to, and click Add. At the bottom, where the template has added these headings, this is where we can make any notes that we want to. So now we've added our note. If I click back into our notes page, we can then see that our new note has been added to this list here. This main list will contain all of the notes that you create. Now, rather than having different sections to only show notes about clients or companies, instead you can use the search function at the top to find any note you want. So for example, if this list was full and we wanted to find only the notes related to Sherlock Holmes, we can just search for Sherlock, and there we go. Everything else disappears and we're left with what we need. Throughout the dashboard, there's also other sections where notes will appear. If we head into the quotes page, for example, and scroll down to the bottom, we'll see all the notes related to our quote pages. Same again with the contacts page. If we scroll down to the bottom, here we can see all of the notes related to our contacts. By using the note functionality of the dashboard, it means you can keep all of your notes super organized, and they're all linked to your clients, so you can find the right note really easily. And there we have it. That's the Freelance Client Dashboard template for Notion. To purchase the template or read more about it, check the link in the description. As ever, do hit like and subscribe, and check out madebyloop.co.uk for more resources.